Hey there, Bizcasters. I just want to jump in really quick. There has been one update that has happened since we recorded this original episode. Since we recorded in February, Social Media Examiner has decided to discontinue the marketing agency show that Brooke was the host of. And so I asked Brooke whether or not she wanted to still continue because we do significantly talk about that show and her experience as the host of it. And we both felt like the lessons inside of the podcast still had some really great relevance for all of you listening, especially if you're starting your own podcast. We decided to keep the episode as is and still share everything with you. I just wanted to make you aware of the changes in the show since we've recorded. So let's go ahead and dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of Bizcasters. I am so excited. I have my friend Brooke Sellas with me. She is so much fun as we've been going through our series on what it's like to have different variety of podcasts, right? Everybody thinks that you do interviews or you do solos. And really the landscape of podcast shows is as creative as you would like to make it. It's just like anything else. We don't have to stick to any one format. So I've been bringing in some friends who all have taken different approaches, have different strategies. And I wanted to bring Brooke in because she's got two different experiences that we're going to talk about today. One is the co-hosting version. We're going to talk about what it's like to have a co-host or work with co-hosts. And then she's also we were trying to think of the right term, kind of like a brand ambassador. So she is a solo host now for a show with Social Media Examiner. And that is now her show, but it's not a show for her business. So,
Mhm.
Brooke, tell my listeners a little bit about you and a little bit about what it is you do.
Hello, I'm Brooke Sellas. I'm the founder and CEO of B Squared Media. We do social media marketing and social care. We turned 12. Oh my gosh, we
Woohoo, I
turned
know.
12. It's crazy. And I guess my podcasting journey, you know what? It's funny. I don't even think you and I talked about this, Sarah. My podcasting journey started early in my career in B Squared started in 2012, so maybe like 2014.
Oh, wow.
We had a group of bloggers called the Social Solutions Collective.
You were talking about that on
And
your episode with Jen Herman. I had never even heard of this until
yes,
then.
it's like all the OGs. Jen Herman was a part of the group, Mike Alton. There's a ton of us, Jeff C., who are in this group. And Mally, the woman who formed that group, asked me if I wanted to co-host a podcast with her. So that was
Oh,
my first foray into hosting a podcast. I think we were early to market back then with the podcast. It didn't really take off, so it didn't go very far. And then, yeah, since then I've had two other co-hosting gigs.
yeah.
One with Mark Schaefer on the Marketing Companion, and another one that kind of started and fizzled out very quickly that was supposed to be around customer experience and digital customer experience.
Why go the co-hosting route? I have my reasons for why I would go co-host, but why did you go co-host?
The short answer is, Sarah, imposter syndrome. I
Ah,
hate my face. I hate my voice. Funnily enough, I got a speaker review from Social Media Marketing World, which you and I were hanging out at,
mhm.
and they called me. They gave me a low score and said that my voice was very annoying. So it was like validation, though, for something that I've been
Terrible.
like nervous about forever.
All
I
right.
just, I'm not a
One.
kid.
One person said that, Brooke. One person said that.
And me, you know. So I just never felt strong enough. I didn't feel like I had enough to offer on my own to be on my own. What did Brooke Sellas have to say that was that important?
Lots,
That's the
because
truth.
you're on stages everywhere. She has lots to say, lots and lots of good things to say. But then it's what did the co-host bring? So what did you bring to that co-host though, if that's how you were approaching that?
With Mark, I think it was an energy thing. He's very stoic and aloof, and I'm like the giggly, silly, goofy gal, the yin and the yang. And people would comment all the time on the energy or how I made him giggle a lot more. I think I helped make him more approachable
Yeah.
to people who don't know him. And with the other show, it was like, hey, we both care about CX. Let's try to do this show thing. But working with a co-host is hard because
Mhm.
it's not your show
Right.
or it was our show on
Well,
the
I guess,
second
and that's the
venture.
thing we have to acknowledge here too, was that in your co-hosting situations, this wasn't like co-hosting with someone inside your own company. These were co-hosting with friends and peers who have their own businesses and their own
Mhm.
agendas that were out
Mhm.
there. So that was always my question to you was how did you guys manage that? Because, we talk about, well, have a website, have a funnel, have all of these things for that. Well, where
Yeah.
were you funneling people? So how did that end up working out or how did you manage that?
That's a great question, and I feel like that's something that people need to understand. It's great being a co-host. I enjoyed my time on the Marketing Companion, but at the end of the day, it didn't really do anything financially for me
Mhm.
because I was supporting someone else's business. And Mark's audience is not the same as my audience. We
Right.
work with a lot of middle tier to enterprise size brands. His audience is more like solopreneurs, social media
Ooh,
marketers,
very different.
some marketers who work for maybe mid tier enterprise size brands, but it wasn't a fit. We were trying to make those puzzle pieces fit, but they really weren't a fit. And so even though the exposure was great and everybody's come do this for
Yeah,
exposure, um,
exposure.
yeah, even though the exposure was fantastic, it still didn't lead to revenue. I mean,
Right.
isn't that why we're all doing this at the end of the day?
Right.
Unless you really just love to be seen. Hi, I've already told you I don't. At the end of the day, it needs to have some sort of like business outcome for
Mhm.
me. And that unfortunately didn't happen in any three of those situations.
I know, so strange. In any of those situations, you really weren't finding a business outlet, but the exposure, on the one hand, you can say, okay, yeah, I've had 3 podcasts and yeah, I've been doing this and hey, it's out there. But again, it comes down to how are you repurposing that? What were people
Yeah.
doing with that information once they landed there and found it? And I do think that becomes really difficult in a co-hosting situation in terms of what that really looks like and where that's going to go.
Mm.
When you're looking at all of that too, where how did that work with your relationships? Because I know we've talked about this a little bit too in the past. Like with each one of these situations, how did those come to pass and what really went on with all of that? And where did the work go? Because that was the other thing too, right? What happened when because post-production, let's not kid ourselves. Post-production on a podcast is not medial work. There's quite a few hours
Right.
that have to go in if you're really going to produce the podcast, you're gonna
Mhm.
repurpose it, put it on a website, do all of that stuff when you're not in the same boat in terms of, like, where this is going and what you're gonna get out of it. How did you guys figure out who was gonna be responsible for these things?
In all of those situations, what was so fantastic was that the production was covered by the other person. So, like,
Oh.
with Mally, shout out again, Mally, hi. She's so tech savvy. She was like, "Don't worry about production. I'll take care of
Oh,
everything." I was like,
yeah.
"Fantastic." And this was, like, solely a podcast. There was no video involved. So, it was a lot easier for me, even though I don't love my voice, because I didn't have to have
The
my face
face.
and my voice. Right.
The face. Face
And
heavy.
then with Mark, he outsourced his production to someone, so he had someone doing his production
Okay.
for him, so
Easy
taken care
enough.
of there. And then with the last one, the person that I was co-hosting with also did the production, so I didn't have to do any of the production there. But even with that one, it's we agreed to a cadence, we agreed to a style. It would be us on one show, and then on the other show, it would be us interviewing someone in the industry, and then back and forth. And this person couldn't meet timelines. They couldn't get shows out on time.
Mm,
And as Sarah, if you want to get sponsorship for your show and have a serious show, you've got to treat it seriously.
yeah.
So there is no, we'll just publish when we feel like it, especially if you're trying to get sponsorship.
And in this case, that would have been your main monetization strategy, given that, like you said, your audiences were very different. So,
Hmm.
what you were looking for there wouldn't have necessarily led to business, but monetization wise would have been through sponsorships.
Right.
So, two questions that come up with this because you've now had this experience of being a solo host as well as the co hosting side of things. I'm really curious when you're interviewing people, how did you find that experience? I just, watching people, it's hard enough to have a three-way conversation in person when you're trying to give like visual cues of, hey, I want to ask a question or otherwise. How did you find that experience when you were interviewing people with two hosts that were asking questions? How did that work out?
We had the frequency and a style. So I'd be like, you're going to take this question and then I'll take this question.
Mm,
And for the most part, we were able to follow that. So it wasn't that hard. I can remember one time that we were scrambling because I had gotten mixed up on the questions, and we were running out of time, and yeah. It's it can be I will say this, I really enjoy doing it on my own
Mm.
immensely, like, leaps and bounds. Like, I probably would never co-host again unless it was someone, like, I loved till the end of my days, because it is
Yeah.
hard to partner with someone to do, like you said, especially an interview show where you're having to have 2 people interview a 1 or 2 more people. It's a nightmare. Not
But
gonna lie.
and yeah, I can imagine that it is. I watch people, like, I was watching Mike Alton on Jeff's show there, and who's his
Oh,
partner?
Jeff C.
And who's his
Oh,
partner?
his new partner. Oh,
I wanna say
is it
Connor, but is that right?
yeah,
Is it
I wanna
Connor?
say mm,
Maybe
I
not.
think so.
I'm gonna have to
Anyway,
go back
love
and
you,
look.
Jeff.
But I was watching the 3 of them, and it's really interesting in terms of watching just the dynamics between 3 people, where there's 2 people and there's always a dominant personality, right? Like,
Yes, I was just thinking that,
it
yes.
doesn't matter, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean that there is always somebody whose personality is going to be dominant in a three-way situation. And of
Yeah,
course, when you're interviewing somebody, the interviewee is the one we want to put the focus on as part of what we do as hosts. And so there's always this like third person. It just always feels like there's this third person out. And it's all of a sudden they jump in and you're like, oh, wait, yeah, they're here too. And it's just I find it interesting trying to figure out how do you strike that balance with 3 people in a video conversation, because I think that's just so much harder than if we're on stage together or if we are in person together. The body
mhm.
cues and the visual things that we do help us so much more with adjusting that conversation, but video, I just think is such a different level for that.
Because when we were recording for a marketing agency show, I was telling you about those little visual cues that I do with
Oh, yeah,
the
the instant
boxes in
stuff.
StreamYard, and you were like, "I'm stealing that." But you have to come up with those things because, yes, when I'm interviewing someone now, they are the star of the show, and I say that to them, right? I said it to you, like, "Hey, you're the star. This is all about you. I wanna put you on a pedestal. I wanna make you feel good. I want you to spill all your secrets." But there are some people who, like, will literally talk the full 30 minutes without taking a breath, and so you have to have that cue to be like, "Hello, I'm
I have
we
a
gotta
thought.
we have 17 more questions to get through over here."
I have a thought. Can I interject? I know.
Because no one wants to hear a talking head. I want the shows to be a conversation, not an interview,
Right.
but there have been a few where
It's a
yeah.
very one-sided conversation. I've edited more
Mhm.
than my fair share of the one-sided conversations from folks. It's
Mhm.
amazing. I know that folks, one of the things they say when you go out to speak, right? Don't they say, "Or you're gonna create a business?" They say, "What's something you could speak about for 30 minutes nonstop?"
Yeah.
And there are some folks that have no problem with that whatsoever.
Horses. Horses
Horses.
would be mine.
I know,
Horses.
yours is horses. I love it. I wish we were closer because I would love to see your horses. The
Aw.
horses you ride anyway. I know they're not
Yes.
yours at the moment, but and just give my daughter an excuse to see horses because she loves them too.
We're
Yes,
gonna
we
make
go
it
off on
happen.
tangents. This is what
We're
we
gonna make
do.
it happen.
See,
But
folks,
this is also what's so beautiful about podcasting. Can we talk about this?
yes.
I feel like these moments when you get those glimpses of who that person really is
Mhm. Yeah.
outside of the interview and the planned professional conversation,
Yeah.
because those are the disclosures that I talk about that help you get to know someone and decide if you like them or
Mhm.
not.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's when those moments don't happen in a podcast. I think at times you need to step back and reevaluate a little bit in terms of either who you're bringing on as a guest or how you're managing things as a host. And I've had a couple of conversations about this with folks too in terms of, do you give out questions in advance or do you not give out questions in advance? And I know you're a big question in advance person, or at least you are inside the realm of Social Media Examiner. And I have not yet done that. And it was funny because it
Mm.
also came up as a conversation with Mike Alton. And he's, wow, I'm really surprised that you're able to like wing this conversation a little bit. And little did he know, I wasn't really winging it. I had my questions. I knew what I wanted to
Ah,
ask him. I just hadn't shared it with him. And when we were talking, I was talking with Doreen about this too, Doreen Morin. And she and I were talking that she never does it for her live show. And she says, because I don't want people to prepare too much in advance.
yeah.
And that's her thing. She said, "I don't want them to get so canned in their answers that they lose the conversation." And I said, that's an interesting way of looking at it. And that's how I was looking at it too, in terms of, I know for your show, when I got your questions in advance, like I panicked over some of the questions. I was like, I know that I can answer this. What am I going to say when she asks me
It wasn't on
this?
purpose.
I know, but it was just so funny because but that was my exact response was, "I'm not so sure I'm the one that should be answering these questions," or something along those lines. So, it's just a really interesting balance, but I do think that it's so much easier to control when it is just you though, right? Because we can
Mhm.
take that conversation in a different direction. When you're co-hosting, there is this other person that if you don't or don't necessarily have the right sync with, which hopefully you do if you have decided to co-host with somebody, but you've got to have that good sync up of personalities. I think of it as like actors on a stage. Like when
Yeah.
actors on a stage mess up, if you've ever had the glorious chance of being a live theater performer, I have way more than I'd like to admit sometimes, but I love it. I lie. I love it. I wish I could still do it. But if you've ever been on stage and an actor loses their line or an actor misses a mark or an actor does something, like you have to be able to make up for that and think on your feet for that person so that things
Mhm.
still run streamlessly. I think when you're doing these co-hosting shows, you have to have that kind of banter and appreciation for each other's styles in that same
Yeah.
way.
Agreed. And I'm not the type of person to toot my own horn, but I have had a lot of people say that they've really enjoyed doing the marketing agency show with me.
Mhm.
And I think it's because
Yeah,
I think there's two big key reasons why. I really do prep, like those questions that you got.
you do.
I try to think of my main goal is really helping the audience, and the
Mhm.
audience needs to hear some practical advice, but also tactical, right? So I want to get to that. I want to share the story because we all have these really interesting stories behind why we do what we do.
Mhm.
And I also think and this could even be the biggest factor, Sarah, is that I'm an active listener.
Yes.
When someone is speaking and answering my question, I'm actively listening so that I can add on to it or go down a deeper hole if we need to. Whereas I feel like a lot of podcast hosts that I've worked with and a lot of them that we listen to or
Mhm.
stop listening to because they do this, you can tell they're listening to talk. They're waiting
Oh,
for their turn to talk.
oh,
And I despise that. Why are you on a podcast? Because you want to hear yourself talk? Well, then don't have guests.
right, just
Be
do
a
a solo
talking
show.
head.
Do a
Yeah.
solo show.
Yeah.
Have fun with your
Yeah.
and I fully believe that there are spaces for solo shows as well as interview shows. But
Mhm.
I'm with you. I think with a solo show, it's gotta have a point, right? You've gotta
Mhm.
be having people listen to you for a reason. What are they trying to gain from you? What are you trying to teach them? Something along those lines. And you are very good at that. And
Oh,
I do
thanks.
like that ability, like you said, for you too, and you mentioned it early on, like you do have this gift of bringing people out. So I think that
Oh,
helps too, like bringing people's personalities out, bringing people to shine. It's just something you naturally do. You're so easy to talk to, I think, personally.
thanks.
I
I
would
think it's
hope
because 'cause I'm
everybody else.
goofy.
Maybe,
I'm
I just think it's
goofy, so
you.
I allow people to be goofy in my space.
Yes.
I want you to be goofy in my
Right.
space. How goofy were we on the dance
Oh,
floor
we were
at Social Media Marketing World? Like, that is what you get with me, and
yeah.
I know everyone says that, but I really mean it, and that means silly, goofy nonsense most of the time.
And it's really fun because when you think about the fact that you are the CEO of a larger company, like it's like people like get that brand, like you get this little block in your head of what you think, especially female
Oh,
CEOs, like what we're supposed to
yes.
be like and what you look
Yes.
like and how you act
Mhm.
about things. And I like I said, Brooke was on the dance floor. We were on the dance floor at Social Media
With
Marketing World.
Stelzner,
Will Stelzner, we have video. We
we
were
will
having
really
such a good time. It's
Yeah.
karaoke nonetheless.
Oh, it was so
It
much
was
fun.
so much fun, guys. If you've never been to Social Media Marketing World, big plug out for that conference. Brooke is
Come
typically
see me
on
and Sarah
stage, but we
on
are
the dance
there.
floor.
We're hanging out. We're on the dance floor. We're having a good time. It's such a good conference to go
Forget the
to and
stage.
meet
Come
all these
see us on the
people.
dance floor.
Yeah, find us on the dance floor with or without a drink. Just find us on the dance floor. Let's have a good time.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your experiences with Social Media Examiner. So
Oh,
you have since
yeah.
now walked away from the co-hosting spaces. So we've done that.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
now you're in this experience of being the solo host. And we're going to talk about how you feel about that now versus how you felt about that when you first started podcasting. And how this came about, because again, you're still hosting a show that's not for your
I know.
company.
I know. I'm my
Um,
own worst enemy.
I have been for 2 years, guys, I've been trying to get Brooke to, start her own podcast for her own company. Eventually, we'll get there.
It's
But
been on my list for 2 years.
it will, and it will continue. Well, now we have Brooke Bites, which is like baby stepping in. So
Baby,
follow
baby.
Brooke on LinkedIn. We get Brooke Bites. Brooke Bites are awesome. But this experience is really something very different in terms of
Mhm.
considering how you might want to approach being a podcaster. Because now I'm not saying these opportunities are out there and they're always readily available, but this is a really interesting, because Mike Stelzner is such a content junkie, for lack of better words. Like, he has so much content that he
Mhm.
produces through Social Media Examiner. And he has 3 active podcasts, 4,
Yeah.
3?
3 right
3.
now.
1 he hosts, and then 2
Mhm.
others that he has co-hosts.
Jerry Potter.
Jerry Potter, that's right. How do I forget that name? So
Hi,
he
Jerry.
there's just no way he would be able to manage all of this on his
Mm-mm.
own. So he has gone out and selectively chosen wonderful people to manage that. But what is that experience like?
Okay, I'll break it down for you. Here's how the story went. Not this year, but last year, I went to
Mhm.
Social Media Marketing World. I spoke there. And after that show ended, Mike sent out an email to all of the attendees of 2023 event and said, "Hey, we heard you. You're telling us that we don't have enough agency related content. We want to fix that. In that vein, we're looking for someone to host a podcast for marketing agency owners
Mhm.
about agency life. Tell us if you're interested." And I'm reading this and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, how much fun would this be?" Right? So I just like, "I'm interested," not thinking anything about it really. I went and filled out the thing and I was like,
Sure.
Whatever." Yeah, exactly. And then all of a sudden I get an email from Lisa, who's their head of content,
Yep.
and Jennifer, who's Mike's assistant. And they're like, "Oh, we want to get you on an interview." I'm like, "Okay." And I just go into the interview with my same little like goofy self.
Not
Not that I
thinking this
wasn't
was gonna
taking
go
it
anywhere, right?
seriously, but I'm like, there are so many people. Like, I bet they're gonna hire some like huge influencer,
Mm.
someone we all know.
Yep.
And so we just giggled all throughout the interview. And then all of a sudden they were like, "Can you do a second interview?" I was like, and then I was kind of like, "Wait a minute."
Wait, are you serious?
Is is this about to be a thing? Is this a thing? And so then I get on the second interview and it's with Mike.
Oh,
And we have a 2-hour conversation. And again, like I was just being me because I really can't be anyone else. I just can't put
why?
on airs. I can try really hard, y'all. Sometimes I try to be very serious. I'm like, I'm not going to laugh. I'm not going to giggle. I'm going to be very serious. And it never works out. Ever.
All I think about is your stage talk and your
I cannot help myself. I just can't. I gotta throw a joke or a dance move
oh,
in somewhere. And in the middle of my interview with Mike, he's, "Do you want this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, now I do." And he was like, "Great, you got it." We don't need to talk anymore. "You're perfect. You have the agency experience. You've done this for so long.
yeah,
I was the vibe they were looking for." And the rest is history. We're coming up on a year and I have
yeah.
had a blast. And let me tell you this, because Mike Stelzner deserves a shout out for this.
Mhm.
He said to you, "I think people in the past knew you were a star, and that's why they wanted to co-host with you." And he was like, "But they didn't want you to go out on your own." He's like, "I want you to go out on your own and I want you to flourish." And I'll never forget. It meant so much to me. I think I actually got all teary when he said it.
Teary over that too. That's an amazing compliment. And I
Yeah.
can totally see that would be the case with you, that everybody else would see the star that you are, but you're not seeing it for yourself. So you are
Yes.
diminishing your star status,
Because I don't I you know what? I love it when everybody's a star. I want everybody to be happy.
which makes you such a wonderful human.
Thanks.
You're one of those people, you raise everybody else up around you.
Oh,
I've seen you
thank
do it.
you.
You do it in vast amounts of support that you give the people that you know, but you don't do it for yourself. And so how have you been feeling now? So now you're like, you are almost a year in, right?
Mhm.
From
Mhm.
your launched episodes for the marketing agency podcast. Now that you are a year in as the solo host.
I love it, honestly. In the beginning, it was tough. I'm not gonna lie. I had never been a solo host. I've already told you how much imposter syndrome I have.
Mm.
I was nervous. I wasn't myself. I think you can, if you watch from the beginning throughout, and I even had, like, friends on in the beginning, trying to make it easier for myself,
Yeah.
but you can tell as the show has progressed that I've just gotten all of the nervousness and the butterflies have gone away, and I just feel much more confident. So, the show has helped me a little bit with that imposter syndrome, I have to say, which is wonderful. It's not all the way gone, but um, I love it. I love having the freedom to do what I wanna do, to ask the questions I wanna ask, to go down the rabbit holes I wanna go down, to not have to work with anyone else's schedule other than the guest, which sometimes can be a little bit of a nightmare. But for the most part, I've created a process, like an
Mhm.
automated process where
Yeah.
it happens on its own, so I don't have to work so hard at that, and I get paid to do it.
I know, right?
So
Hello.
it's honestly, like, I'm very honored and pleased and excited.
And it's
I
a fun
love
little
it.
cap in that's a fun little feather in your cap though too to say, "Hey, I'm a host for Social Media Examiner." I'm sorry. I think that
Yeah.
to me that's like a little feather in the cap too. But you've been a speaker for him and a writer for him and everything else. So, you're part of that world, as I like
Yeah,
to say.
part of
Andrea
the
and all you
world.
guys are part of that, part of his world.
I was singing.
Um
Yeah. Yeah, it's just I learn so much.
Yeah.
It's fascinating that I can't even explain. There are no words to explain what it is because I learn so much from every guest. I feel like I'm having fun, I'm learning, and I'm getting paid to do something that I'm love having fun and learning. Like, it's
I feel like you just wrapped up like somebody's like all of our dream jobs. Like that's
yeah.
isn't that why most
Yeah.
of us started our own businesses? Because that was exactly what we wanted to be able to do right there,
Yeah.
you
But the
know?
stress of owning it and the stress of production are not on my plate.
Yeah, see, and then you have that too, right? So that you don't have to worry about producing it and the content they produce is pretty cool because I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh," all of a sudden I was tagged in, "Oh, here's a blog post from your episode." I'm like, "What? Oh, cool. Here's one more
Right?
piece."
Yeah, they're so smart with content. That's the other thing. I learn from them. I learn
Oh,
from
yeah.
them. I learn how they do their processes. I learn from the guest who I talk to. I just feel like I'm constantly learning, and I'm a constant learner. So
Right.
that's very fulfilling for me.
So, what would be your piece of advice as they're devising the best path forward for themselves? Is it co-hosting? Is it solo hosting? What advice would you give?
My personal advice, this is just my opinion, I would try to do what I haven't been able to do. And I know I'm over here being like, you should really go solo. And I've never done that really, truly, because even though I'm solo now, I'm doing it for someone else's brand.
Mhm.
But that would be my advice because if you have been in business for any number of years, you do have a story to tell.
Yeah.
And it's so much easier, it's less messy. And ultimately, if you are doing this for lead gen
Mhm.
or revenue dollars or sponsorship or whatever it is, it's that much easier when you're on your own. So don't be like me and go out there and do the thing.
So then what happens for folks that are like you and have that imposter syndrome and they are afraid to do that? What did you do to help start getting over that a little bit? Like you've said you've transformed over the last year, but how has that transformation really happened? Like what have you done to help improve that for yourself?
I think I'm going to use a horse thing here. Sorry, I'm a horse person, so this is what I do.
Love it.
It's more time in the saddle. This is
Mm,
what I say all the time. When you want to fix something in writing, there's so many nuances in dressage. It's just you get it from more time in the saddle. So the more I do it, the more comfortable I get. So maybe my advice is even if you don't want to go out there and publish it,
mhm.
record it to a private YouTube channel, send it to some of your favorite friends or people who are in the industry who would give you really good feedback
Yeah.
and let them give you pointers. I've had people reach out like Sarah, like my friend Chris Penn, my friend Jeff, and they've all been podcasters. And so
Okay.
they've all given me little tips here and there. So you will have a group of people who will give you constructive feedback.
Mhm.
So go for it, make it private, get that feedback, and then go from there.
Yeah, I love that advice because we have to practice, right? Regardless of anything that we do. I think one of the best pieces of social media advice I ever heard from folks that were looking to go live or looking to start doing this kind of content was to do stories. Because stories only
Yeah,
last for 24
short.
hours. So no matter how badly you screw it up, it's still only going to be up there for 24 hours and then it's
That's
gone.
great advice. Brooke's writing this down. Yeah.
That one, I love that, and I've tried that myself from time to time because I don't really have an Instagram following, so I'm like, "Oh, I can go out on
Same.
Instagram and do this thing, and I can get over if I can get past the vanity numbers of nobody's looking at this." That really wasn't the point, it was the
Right.
practicing that
Right.
truly was the point to do this. Find ways to practice. StreamYard's a great tool, we're using StreamYard here
Yeah.
to record today. Record in StreamYard. Just do it and then go back and listen to it. Even if you never do post it somewhere else, you can just do the recording and practice that recording. But the biggest thing is don't get hung up. I think is my
Yeah.
biggest piece of advice with this as you practice. Don't allow yourself to get hung up because that's where I see people who do solo shows have problems because then they try to be perfectionists and they go
Mhm.
too far in the other direction. At least with the interview style, like it's you and me. And if I screw up, well, I'll fix that in post production. Um But,
I didn't think about it that way, but that's
it
true.
pushes
Yeah.
you forward because I'm having
Mhm.
this conversation with you. Where if I'm doing this on my own, I'm probably gonna do 2, 3, 4, 5, 7,000 takes because, "Oh, no, I didn't
Yeah.
say that," or, "Oh, no, I didn't like the way I did this." And so don't let yourself get hung up there. Practice the recordings, practice doing what you do, and then I do love the advice, though, of just share it with somebody. Let somebody else take a look and give you that constructive feedback because that will only help you grow and grow in your confidence. And as I said on Brooke's show, when we talked about this, remember, I just said, I have no following on Instagram. So if I go out and post anything on Instagram, nobody going to see it. Remember, the world isn't going to see anything you do in the first round, maybe not even in the first 6 rounds or even in the first 10 rounds. Use that as your practice. Everybody's going to tell you, every big YouTuber, every big podcaster is going to tell you the first like X number of episodes you do are probably going to be terrible. And they're not going to be
Mhm.
your best work. If you go with Pat Flynn, I think has often shared his very first podcast
He
episode,
does.
which is all of
Yeah.
5 minutes long of this is Pat Flynn. I'm in my closet and I'm creating a podcast about whatever. He had no premise. He had no idea what he just recorded and then
And now
stuck
look.
it out. And look at him. Like,
Yeah.
oh my
It's
God.
truly.
And he's one
It's
of the
time in the saddle.
best.
It's time
It's
in the
time
saddle.
and he has so much time in the saddle. So many of them
Time
do.
on the mic. Yeah.
Time on the
Yeah.
mic, time in the saddle, practice, listen back, hear what you like, what you don't like, what you wanna fix, what you don't like to fix your lighting. You know, my lighting's all fixed after talking to Brooke after last time round when I met with her.
Those
You
blinds should be closed, speaking of,
That's
but,
okay. You're
we do
beautifully
our
bright.
best. Um, Also Jen Herman, speaking of Jen
Mm,
earlier,
love her.
on the interview with her for marketing agency show, she said, "Who cares if 3 people watch that story?" She's like, "What if 3 people walked into your store? Would you be
Right.
upset or would you be happy?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, what a great way to put it.
I know,
If
and
you were a brick and mortar store and 3 people walked in to look at your stuff, you'd be like thrilled."
you don't
Mhm.
know who's really listening, and don't make that be like, "Oh my god, so and so is gonna be listening to me." Just
Shoot.
it's just you just have to try and you can't stop yourself. If it's something I agree, everybody has a story. Everybody has a way of telling it, and don't talk yourself out of this idea of there's 7,000 other marketing podcasts or whatever. Yes, but there is
It's
only
true.
one you, and as Brooke said early on, it's only your personality. You only have
Mm.
one. Your personality is your personality. Your perspective is your perspective. And we can all take on the same topic in the same light, but it's still going to come out so differently because I'm going to talk to Brooke different than somebody else is going to talk to Brooke. And Brooke's going to talk to somebody else differently than somebody else would do interview that same person. And
Yeah.
that is what makes podcasting, I think, so powerful is that we can tell those stories from those different perspectives in ways I just don't think the written word always conveys as well.
You brought up a great point there too. Do the deep dive if you are going to interview someone. Don't
Mhm.
give the same interview with the same questions, asking them the same stuff. Everybody wants to talk about like that thing they did or that amazing book they wrote or whatever. You can, but do it in a way that's different from all of the other interviews that they've been on because nobody's going to listen if they've already heard it before.
And I so agree. And that's part of what we try to do here. I'm bringing on Brooke, not to talk about customer care, not to talk about social media. I'm bringing her on to talk about her podcasting experience, right? Not sure how many other people have actually interviewed her. She didn't
0.
bring me on to talk to me about podcasting. I'm on Social Media Examiner, the agency show, talking
Mhm.
about founder branding,
Mhm.
which is not something most people would necessarily think to ask for. So think about
Right.
the folks that you want to talk to. I totally think this is a great point. Think about the folks you want to talk to and find a new angle about what they do. It makes them also more willing to share it too.
Yeah.
because it's a
They
different,
they
they're
wanna go on. They wanna be on the show.
right.
They don't wanna do the same boring interview with the same boring questions.
Right. That's what Andrew and Pete always say too. They're like, we stopped sharing episodes we were on because everybody's asking us the same questions. So it was like they would want to share the episode if it was something different for their
Mhm.
audience. It was a story they
Mhm.
hadn't necessarily shared with their audience, or they said something they wouldn't necessarily normally say. So if you can find a way to do that and still get all these amazing people out there onto your show, then you're going to have a show that's shareable as well, because your guests are going to be more engaged in what it is you're doing.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to say no. Like, I've had,
Mm.
guests for the marketing agency show came and be like, "I wanna do this topic." I'm like, "Nope, we've done that topic. Bring me something else." Period.
Have you ever said no to a guest?
I have.
You have.
Yeah.
Why? I'm just really curious
Um,
now. Because most people won't
they
say no. They'll record it and then ignore it.
no, because I'm
You have time.
getting paid to do this for someone
Right.
else, so
This
I
is your
can't
time.
waste their time and their
Right.
dollars. If they can't, a lot of people will come on and be like, "I'm gonna talk about my such and such service and how," but and I'm like, "Nope, that's not what the show's about. Let me resend you what I already sent you. It's about you as a marketing agency owner.
Mhm.
What are the things that you've been through that you think can help other marketing agency owners? We're not here to sell your advertising services or your membership. We're here
Right.
to talk about what your challenges and successes have been as an agency owner. And if we can't get to that topic, then maybe this isn't the show for you."
And you've actually said no to people. I am so
Mhm.
proud of you.
I know it's hard for me, but
It's
I
hard
feel
for
like I can
anybody.
stick to it because I could be like, "Look, these are the rules. I don't
Right.
make the rules."
That's nice too, right? Like, it's, you can say that this isn't my show.
Yeah, I'm following the rules here, but honestly, it's true. Like, a lot of people want to come on to podcasts like this one and be
Of
like,
course.
"Let me tell you about my service. You need to go sign up right now for $2.99." And it's like, "No, that's gross. Stop it."
Have they ever
So
done that though? Like, all right, now I know we're gonna end up over, but
I know, I can't name names, but I've
have
had
you?
people talk about their services or like, and I'm a speaker, like, and I'm like, I want to be like, it's rude. I would never would, but my inside voice, y'all, it's like, let's take a shot every time Sarah says on my interview, like, and because I'm a speaker on stages, like, I'd be like blasted by the end of the show.
Okay.
I know,
We should do playback.
terrible.
We'll do playbacks,
But
and that's what we'll do.
honestly, we would all be
We should do watch parties.
inebriated.
There we go.
Oh
Watch
my god,
parties.
watch parties.
We need a watch party.
Y'all,
Y'all.
the gamification of it though is great. Andy Cohen, I don't know if you watch any of his stuff on Bravo. He always has these games that the guests play,
Yeah.
and I swear that's why they have such a high viewership because they don't care about you asking about the latest movie they were in or
Right.
the episode or whatever. They want to see these people doing silly games or like talking about stuff
Right.
they don't talk about.
Right. That's what people want to see. We want to see the behind the scenes. Like, we know your book's coming out. We know you're like, we want to see
I
the
know you're
other
a
stuff.
speaker.
We get it.
Stop it.
It's too funny. All right. Because I'm going to end up over time with you because this is just way
Okay.
too much fun. So, last piece I will ask you for, and I asked this, but one last piece of advice. What advice would you give to someone first starting out on their podcast? What would be the thing you would tell them?
So let's say you're taking the advice of creating that private channel and getting to talk to people to give you constructive criticism. I would also pick some people in the industry related to the topic that you want the show to be on, who you know in some way, shape, or form, or maybe who's like a second connection. Oh, I know Sarah knows Andrea Ball. I want to interview her for one of these practice rounds. Can you make an introduction? Make that list of those people if you are going to do an interview style show, and then do the actual interview in those private beta tests.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I'm going to ask one last question. Sorry. Cause this
Okay.
is really and this is, it's not off topic, but on topic too. I think one of the biggest things with interview podcasts is finding guests. How do you find your
Yeah.
guests?
I very first, obvious, went through my friends. So I have a sphere of influence worksheet that I've had literally since I was in nonprofit days, and I use that in business still. I filled that out. I wrote a whole spreadsheet. It was one of the first things I turned in to Social Media Examiner was my brainstorming spreadsheet of who I knew and potential topics. And I started there, and then automatically it fans out because somebody introduces me to someone, and then that person introduces me to someone else. And if nobody's introducing you on their own, then you say, hey, Sarah, who else do you think would be a great interview for this show?
Mm-hmm.
And then Sarah will be like, oh my gosh, I have so many people I can introduce you to.
Yeah, I've heard that advice more than once. So I think that's really good advice, guys. Ask that. I've heard people put it on their forms, their speaker forms or
Yes,
their
I've
guest
seen that.
forms.
Yeah.
It says who else do you think would be a good guest for this show? And they use that
Smart.
as their sort of jumping off point. But have you ever taken somebody outside of that sphere of influence or outside of recommendations? I know you're only a year in, but still, that's quite a few episodes.
Yeah. I've literally had conversations with people on LinkedIn and we don't know each other. You know me, I'm all about having conversational content on
Of
LinkedIn
course.
and they'll jump into the conversation and I'll be like, I don't know who you are, but I need to talk to you about this show, this podcast that I do. Let's DM. And then I'm DMing with Sarah and I'm like, look, I'm like, I promise I'm not a stalker, but I see you're an owner of an agency.
Yep.
I have this show with Social Media Examiner. Would you be interested in being a guest? I have never, ever gotten no.
Very few people I hear do when you ask them truly to be on your podcast because a lot of people want the content. What about the
Yeah.
reverse though? Has anybody approached you that you didn't approach first?
Oh, yes, I ignore those emails. If you were, especially
Ah,
because a lot of them are from like the podcast
the
booking
PR, yeah,
people.
the PR
And
people.
I'm like, I am not going to get you paid to have this person on my show who isn't, a lot of times they're not even agency owners. And I'm like, have you read the description of the show?
Oh my god.
Right? So I just ignore those emails. Sorry. If it's you and you do that, come up with a cool way to get in front of me. Make sure you know what you're talking about, what the show content is on, and tell me why your person's going to have this amazing story, not a sell of their services. And I'd be happy to respond, but I
Right.
haven't seen that happen.
Yeah, I haven't
So,
seen that happen either, which is why I wanted to ask the question to see if maybe you got better responses than
nope.
some of my others. And I've had some podcast hosts that have actually brought those people onto their shows. And sadly, they've been some of the worst shows that we've seen because they're so me focused and they've
Mhm.
no idea what the show's about and they're not even
Well, and
trying.
nothing against this, but, like, I mean, I can imagine that because the people who are hiring people to go get them on the shows,
Mhm.
it again, not knocking it, but it tells you what they're looking for.
But
They're
at the
looking
same
for
time, like if I'm sorry, but as an agency owner, like if you are owning an agency where your job is to go out and basically bring these people onto shows, why aren't you doing a better job of getting them on, like paying attention to what their goals are, what the goals of the podcast? Because I'm sure anybody would still, it's not the fact that there's a PR person involved. Like you're a busy CEO. You probably
Yeah.
could have someone do that for you too. Just pay attention and pitch right and say, "Hey, I
Yeah.
have this person. I think they would be good. Here's the story I think they could tell." So it's not the fact that it's PR, but it just seems to be the fact that these agencies, when they get involved, don't make the connection. But
Yes, I our business tagline is think conversation, not campaign, but my personal professional tagline is do the deep work.
Mhm.
Do the deep work. No one else is doing it. If
Right.
you were the PR podcast hiring agency people and you did come in and say, I know your show's about agency owners and man, are you going to want to talk to Sarah? Let me tell you why.
Right. Like
I would read it. I
exactly.
wouldn't delete it. I would probably reply,
And
but
folks,
that's not how it happens.
no, it's not what happens. And folks, just so you know, even if you don't have a PR agency doing, this is the deep work you need to do to pitch yourself to folks like Brooke and
Mhm.
myself and whoever else. If you've got, especially the big shows, you have to show how you are going to bring value to that show. It's not about you, it's about their show. And if you can pitch it that way and show them the story you want to tell, probably 9 times out of 10, they will say yes because they are looking
Mhm.
for guests too. You just have to show how you're the right fit.
Yeah. Y'all feel free to email me if you're an agency owner listening. Just know you got to do the deep work to get my attention.
And that's, hey, you know what? If you really want it, you'll do it. So, Brooke, where can folks find you? What's the best place to find you if they want to follow along?
I'm playing on LinkedIn mostly these days on social. So Brooke Sellas on LinkedIn. I think I'm the only Brooke Sellas on the planet. I think you could probably
And
Google Brooke Sellas and find me everywhere, but LinkedIn's where I play the most. Or you can visit our website at b squared.media. It's a not com. So it's B squared media, and the URL is b squared.media.
look at you. You're such an innovator. Well, thank you so much, Brooke. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you sharing your experiences. Thanks, everyone. We'll talk again soon.